Hi, it's Patrick. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a basic website. Essentially, that includes 4 pages with a top navigation using Dreamweaver Creative Cloud. I'm going to close this. I'm going to get a file new, make sure HTML5, none, and hit create. Okay, so I'm going to go split view, and I'm assuming that you know the basics of HTML and CSS at this point. However, I'm going to quickly go through and set up the structure for my site. So I make sure my cursor is within my body tag. I'm going to make a little space. I'm going to make sure I have the insert panel open. You can always make sure under window if you don't see it. I'm going to create div. I'm going to call this div container. I'm going to get rid of all this text within it. With my cursor within that, I'm going to create a header tag. I'm going to put my cursor right outside my header tag, create a navigation, put my cursor right outside of that, create a section, cursor right side of that, create one more section, just assuming that I'm going to have multiple sections, and then a footer. Okay, I'm going to clean this up just so you can see the basic structure better. Okay, once I've set up my structure, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I tend to always save my home page of something as index. I'm going to save this in my 502 folder. Down here under document title, I'm going to say Fun with Dreamweaver. I'm going to go ahead and put that as my new header. I'm going to go ahead and put in some sample navigation. So for instance, I'm going to have a home. I'm going to do a space line, page 1, page 2, page 3. And type heading, make a space, heading. When I say make a space, it's essentially, if we look at it, just adding a paragraph tag. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in my information at the bottom, put my cursor in front and add some copyright information, insert character copyright, add a space there. Now I'm going to go to Google and I'm just going to get some dummy text. So all of these are really the same, they do similar things. So here I'm just going to say 200 words looks good, I'll do 2 paragraphs. And I'll copy this. Back into Dreamweaver, between this paragraph tag, I'm going to add that dummy text. I'm going to do the same thing here. And just to be clear, what I was doing is I have this section here, right? The second section tag for a second chunk of content that's related. Right now it has some text called heading within a paragraph tag, which I'm going to now change to a heading tag, and then within that I actually have this dummy text, and there's some multiple paragraph tags. What you can always do to help clean your code up is go to command, clean up HTML, and empty tags or other things you don't need, it's going to get rid of. So now I'm going to add some headings. I'm going to go up to my header, I'm going to highlight that text, I'm going to make sure HTML5 is selected. I'm going to do a heading 1. It's important to think about your levels of heading. It's kind of like an outline. If you have an A, you need a B, etc. So in this case, my heading 1 is usually my most important thing. Then after that, I can have multiple heading 2s and sometimes heading 3s if it's appropriate. So I'm going to make this next level of heading a heading 2, and this would be a heading 2 as well. I'm going to save this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this first link and I'm going to just type in index.html because I want that just to go to my home page, which is the one I'm currently working. So the next page, I'm just going to go ahead and decide what I want to call it and create a link for it. And just call this page 1. Usually you want to have a more descriptive name. Page 1 is not good enough, if you will. And because these are internal pages to a website, I'm just going to have them open in the same window, so I'm not messing with or changing my target at all. I'm leaving that alone. So currently, I'm going to save this, but if I preview this, these links on notice are actually dead links, right? So it goes to a dead page because I've not created that page yet. But overall, the basic content for this web page is taking shape. So I'm going to go back to Dreamweaver, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to create a page for each of these. I have to make sure that I name it exactly as I did with those links. I'm going to save it in the same folder. So what I tend to do when I do this is I'll rename this first heading so visually I'm reminded of which page is which. But now I'm going to do another save as. You'll notice up top it's just creating each of these pages. So now back in Index, I'm going to go to File, Save All. I'm going to preview it. Once more, now everything should work. So I definitely have some of my headings messed up, so I'm just going to review that real quick. Make sure that's called Home, Page 1, Page 2, Page 3. Hopefully it makes sense why I do this. I'm going to save all again and preview. Okay, Home, Page 1, Page 2, Page 3. That looks great. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to make this video perfect. I want you to see kind of the common errors that anyone can go through even when they've been creating some of these sites for a while. So now that I have the basic content, my next step is to basically add some styles. So basically use some CSS, and I want to use one CSS file for all of my pages. So I'm going to click on the CSS designer. I'm going to click on the plus sign and then create a new. I'm going to browse. I'm going to save this in my styles folder. Okay, click OK. So I can see it's showed up here. Now what I want to do with these others is I want to basically go and attach it. So if I go to Format, CSS Styles, Attach, I can browse for that file. And I can repeat the steps for each one. Now this last one I'm going to do a little different just to show you, because I can come up here and this is really all I'm doing is adding this link to this style sheet. So with this last one, and you'll notice that it's up here in the head. So if I go over here to my code and split view, I can go right under my document title and I can add it there. Now I'm going to basically add some styles. For instance, I'm going to add a background color, I'm going to add a color for my font, etc. So when you're thinking about color scheme, one of the things that's handy to do is if you go to color.adobe.com, you can get some inspiration. So when I come here, I can do a couple things. I can go to Explore and I can find some of these great themes out here that I could use. Or I could create my own. For instance, I could go with a monochromatic, and there's a bunch of these different examples. Now, you could find, well, I want a monochromatic, but I don't want this color scheme. I want it to start with, say, something like that, right? So when you know a basic color you want to start with, you can do that, and you can even, adjust it as you go. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explore, and let's click on this one. I'm going to click on Edit. And this is where I can get the information that I want. So what I'm going to do is, and sometimes you'll have to play with what makes sense, while keeping in mind the design principles of CARP, contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with adding this as my background color for my page. So I'm going to go to Body. I'm going to click on my CSS file. I'm going to click the plus sign and go down here, and I'm going to click on Background. Okay, so you notice right now the contrast isn't that good, but if I go back, and now if I go with something like this, we'll see what this looks like for the container. So if I click on Container, click on my CSS, click on the plus sign, click down here, and then when I'm thinking through color scheme, then sometimes I'll jump to my headers at this point. And so with my headers and my body text, I could play with using black, but I could see how maybe this would work for my body text. And sometimes you just have to experiment. So I could go back to container, or I could do it at the body level, but container, and I'm going to go to text, color, and we'll see if we have enough contrast there. So you can see it's not quite enough contrast. So I could do a couple things here. I could get off the script a little and try something darker. Right, so we can see how that works. And then while I'm here with font, I'm going to go ahead and add a line height. Something like that. I'm going to add a font family. I'm going to just stick with Helvetica. I'm going to double click because I want Helvetica to be my main font. Jump back to my site and we'll see what this looks like for my heading 1, and then we'll try this one for my heading 2. So I'm going to click on heading 1, click there, click CSS, make sure I have that pound sign, the hashtag, and I'm not worrying about my padding or my margins yet. Click on my H2, CSS, now I'm going to go to my container and I'm going to focus on adding some padding. Scroll up till I find it. I'm just going to do 10 pixels. Gonna go up to my heading tag again. So my H1, I want to make sure I have it selected, make sure it's selected there. I'm going to add more padding at the top. We'll start with 0 at the bottom. We'll see what this looks like. I'm going to also add a border to my heading. So what I'll do is I'll scroll down till I find it. I'm just going to add a bottom border. I'm going to make it thin. I'm going to make it solid, and I'm just going to use this color. So I'll use the color picker, come over and get that color that I want. And it's a little close, so see, this is where you just keep tinkering to get it exactly right. I'm going to click on my navigation. And I'm just simplifying this code just to make it nice and clear. I'm going to click on text and I'm going to actually right align that. So let's save this and let's preview it. Okay, that looks pretty good. Two other things I'm going to do is right now it doesn't have a width on the container, so I'm going to add a width. I'm going to improve the proximity here by decreasing the white space under my headings. I'm going to make my footer a little smaller. So let's start with doing that. So if I go to container, make sure that's selected. I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to add a width of 960. And then I'm going to go down to margin and I'm going to add a left and a right of auto. And what that's going to do is it's going to center that div. Click on my H2, make sure it's selected there. I'm going to give it a bottom margin of 0. And then I'm going to click on my paragraph tag because I'm going to give it a top margin of 0. Now you'll notice what happened there. I accidentally did not have the paragraph tag selected. So what I can do is I can click on this trash can and I can start over again. So I'm going to click paragraph tag, repeat the steps, try to be very intentional. So you see what it did there. Now that might be a little tighter than I want, so I can play with adding a little space. Okay. So now I'm going to go down to my footer and click on that. Make sure plus sign, go to text. I'm going to center text align it. So one of the few times I center text, then I'm going to actually make the font size smaller. And I'm just going to do pixels, and I'll do 12 pixels. You can see something went funky there. So I can go back and redo that. And sometimes I might even go ahead and use a different color. So I might start with my base color that I'm using for everything else, and then make it a little lighter. So it's still there. It's kind of like the small print in a commercial. So let's preview this, save all, and see what it looks like. So you notice that now there's the width, that looks good. I have multi-navigation, that looks good. I have some nice contrast. I have nice left alignment. Repetition is good. Proximity is good. Everything looks good. So just like that, we created a basic website with 4 pages in Dreamweaver Creative Cloud using HTML5 and CSS. In a future video, I will show you how to create a similar website, but actually with a left navigation instead of a top navigation. Thanks.